London, 1815. Edmund Zephyr, the 6th Duke of Westmoreland, had no patience for the London season. 3 years a widower, he had perfected the art of attending only those social events absolutely required of his station, arriving precisely when decorum dictated, and departing at the earliest opportunity that would not cause offence. His reputation as the Granite Duke served him well, as the matchmaking mammas of the ton had largely abandoned hope of securing him for their daughters. "I cannot fathom why you insist on behaving like a monk who has taken a vow of social abstinence," drawled Lord Richard Hartley, Edmund's oldest friend, as they stood in a corner of Lady Pembroke's ballroom. "You're barely 35. Far too young to resign yourself to a life of solitude." Edmund's grey eyes cooled further as he surveyed the room. "I fulfilled my duty to the dukedom. I married. I produced an heir. The line is secure." His voice dropped. "I have no wish to repeat the experience." Richard sighed and sipped his champagne. "Caroline has been dead for 3 years, Edmund. And I intend to honour her memory by not subjecting another lady to the misfortune of being my duchess." His tone made clear the subject was closed. Richard recognized the futility of pressing further. "At least make an appearance at Almack's next week. Your absence is becoming remarked upon." "Very well." Edmund nodded curtly, then checked his pocket watch. "I have remained precisely 45 minutes. My obligation to Lady Pembroke is discharged." As he turned to leave, a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. A young woman had entered, unaccompanied save for an elderly lady's maid who hovered anxiously behind her. The newcomer's gown, while of quality material, was several seasons out of date, and her chestnut hair was arranged in a simple style that spoke of practicality rather than fashion. "Who is that?" Edmund found himself asking, surprising both Richard and himself. Richard followed his gaze. "Ah. That would be Miss Eliza Thornfield. The daughter of Sir William Thornfield. Country gentry from Derbyshire, I believe. What is she doing here unescorted? And why is she wearing—" Edmund stopped himself, unsure why he cared about either question. "Her father died last month. Consumption, I heard. She's come to London to live with her aunt, Lady Whitmore." Richard's expression turned sympathetic. "Though it seems she's arrived before her aunt expected her, given her lack of proper escort." Edmund watched as Miss Thornfield scanned the room, her shoulders set with determination despite the whispers already circulating around her. When Lady Pembroke approached with a pinched expression, the young woman straightened her spine and met the hostess with a perfect curtsy and calm demeanour. "Brave," Edmund murmured, almost to himself. "Indeed. But bravery won't save her from becoming a social pariah if she continues to flout convention," Richard observed. "Lady Pembroke looks ready to eject her from the premises." Before Edmund realized his intent, he was striding across the ballroom. He intercepted Lady Pembroke just as she was delivering what appeared to be a cutting remark. "Lady Pembroke," he said smoothly, offering a bow. "How fortuitous that you are speaking with Miss Thornfield. I was just coming to claim the dance I requested earlier." Both women stared at him in shock. Lady Pembroke recovered first. "Your Grace! I was unaware you were acquainted with Miss Thornfield." "Sir William was a dear friend," Edmund lied effortlessly. "I promised him I would look after his daughter when she arrived in London." He turned to Eliza, whose wide hazel eyes reflected confusion and wariness. "Miss Thornfield, may I have the honour of this dance?" Eliza hesitated only momentarily before dipping into a graceful curtsy. "The honour would be mine, Your Grace." As Edmund led her to the dance floor, he noted that every eye in the ballroom followed their progress. It had been years since he had danced with anyone, and the gossips would be feasting on this development for weeks. "I don't believe we've been introduced, Your Grace," Eliza said quietly as they took their positions for the quadrille. "And I'm quite certain my father never mentioned an acquaintance with the Duke of Westmoreland." Edmund's lips quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Very astute, Miss Thornfield. We have not met before this evening, and I never had the pleasure of knowing your father." "Then why, you appeared in need of rescue." "I provided it." The music began, and they moved through the first figures of the dance. "How chivalrous," she responded, a hint of irony in her voice. "Though I wonder what benefit the notorious Granite Duke derives from such an act of gallantry." Edmund raised an eyebrow. "You know who I am?" "Everyone knows of the Duke of Westmoreland, sir. Your reputation precedes you. As, apparently, does yours. You've been in London less than a day, I presume." A flush crept up her cheeks. "I arrived this afternoon. My aunt's letter indicated she would meet my coach, but there was no one waiting. Her butler informed me she had already departed for this ball, and I—" She faltered slightly as they circled each other in the dance. "I did not wish to spend my first night in London alone in an unfamiliar house." "So you came directly here," Edmund concluded. "Without a proper chaperone." "My father's health declined rapidly in recent months. I've grown accustomed to managing difficult situations independently." Her chin lifted. "I miscalculated the strictness of London society compared to country life." As the dance concluded, Edmund found himself reluctant to return Miss Thornfield to the sidelines where the gossips waited to devour her reputation. "Allow me to escort you to your aunt," he said. "That is very kind, but unnecessary. I've imposed enough on your generosity." "It is no imposition. Besides, Lady Whitmore will be less inclined to scold you for your unconventional arrival if you appear under my protection." He offered his arm. Eliza regarded him with a shrewd gaze. "And what will it cost me, Your Grace, to be under your protection?" Edmund stiffened. "I beg your pardon. In my experience, men rarely offer assistance without expecting something in return." For the first time in years, Edmund felt a genuine laugh build in his chest. He suppressed it, but could not contain a small smile. Cynical for one so young, Miss Thornfield. Realistic, Your Grace. "I assure you, my assistance comes with no expectations whatsoever." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "In fact, if you wish never to see me again after tonight, I would consider it a blessing." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Now who is being cynical? Before Edmund could respond, a stately woman with Silver Street dark hair approached. "Eliza? Good heavens, child, what are you doing here?" "Aunt Agatha," Eliza curtsied. "I arrived this afternoon, but you had already left for the ball." "I?" She hesitated, then continued with admirable composure, "I made the grievous error of coming directly here. His Grace has been kind enough to save me from complete social ruin." Lady Whitmore turned to Edmund with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Your Grace, I am in your debt. My niece has spent too many years in the country and clearly requires guidance on proper London behavior." "No debt is owed, Lady Whitmore. It was my pleasure to assist Miss Thornfield." Edmund bowed. "If you'll excuse me, I believe I have fulfilled my social obligations for the evening." "So soon?" Lady Whitmore protested. "The evening has barely begun." "Nevertheless, I must depart." Edmund turned to Eliza and bowed. "Miss Thornfield, it was a pleasure making your acquaintance." As he walked away, Edmund felt Eliza's eyes following him. For the first time since Caroline's death, he found himself intrigued by a woman. The sensation was unwelcome. He had sworn never to marry again, never to risk his heart or subject another woman to his coldness. Miss Thornfield would do well to keep her distance from him. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The following afternoon, Edmund was riding in Hyde Park when a commotion caught his attention. A lady's horse had bolted, and its rider was clinging desperately to the saddle. Without hesitation, Edmund spurred his stallion forward, racing alongside the runaway mount until he could reach over and seize the reins, gradually bringing both horses to a halt. "Are you injured?" he asked, turning to the rider. Familiar hazel eyes met his. "We meet again, Your Grace," Eliza said breathlessly, her hair escaping its pins and her cheeks flushed. "Beginning to doubt my ability to survive London without your intervention. Miss Thornfield, I see you've maintained your talent for creating precarious situations." The talent appears to be one of my few consistent qualities. She adjusted herself in the saddle, restoring some semblance of dignity. Though I assure you, I am normally an accomplished horsewoman. This mare is unfamiliar to me. Edmund examined the mare with a critical eye. She's too spirited for a lady's mount. Whoever assigned her to you showed poor judgment. My aunt's stable master. I suspect he underestimated my country manners. Or overestimated your ability to control a half-wild animal, Edmund countered. Rather than taking offense, Eliza laughed, a warm, genuine sound that caused several nearby riders to turn and stare. Perhaps both. Though I maintain I would have regained control eventually. Just before or just after breaking your neck. I prefer to think just before. Her smile faltered as she noticed the attention they were attracting. I fear I'm causing you to become the subject of gossip, Your Grace. Edmund shrugged. My reputation is already sealed. A little additional gossip will hardly alter society's opinion of me. The Granite Duke, she said softly. Why do they call you that? Something in her direct gaze made Edmund answer honestly. Because I am cold, unyielding, and impenetrable. Are you? She asked, tilting her head. I find that difficult to believe. A truly cold man would not have rescued a stranger twice in 24 hours. Before Edmund could respond, Lady Whitmore arrived at a gallop, followed by her groom. Eliza! Thank heavens you're safe. She pulled her horse to a stop, nodding respectfully to Edmund. Your Grace, once again I find myself in your debt. It seems to be becoming a habit, he replied dryly. Lady Whitmore turned to her niece. We should return home immediately. You've had quite a shock. I'm perfectly fine, Aunt, Eliza protested. Nevertheless, we shall depart. Lady Whitmore's tone brooked no argument. She turned back to Edmund. Your Grace, would you do us the honor of dining with us tomorrow evening? A small gathering, just a few friends. It would give me an opportunity to properly thank you for your gallantry. Edmund's instinct was to refuse. He avoided dinner parties whenever possible, finding the forced conversation tedious and the inevitable matchmaking attempts transparent. But before he could formulate a polite decline, he found himself looking at Eliza, whose expression was carefully neutral. I would be delighted, he heard himself say. Lady Whitmore beamed. Excellent. 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. As they rode away, Edmund wondered what madness had possessed him to accept. One dinner, he told himself. One dinner to satisfy his curiosity about the unusual Miss Thornfield, and then he would retreat back to his solitary existence. The dinner at Lady Whitmore's townhouse proved to be more intimate than Edmund had expected. Besides himself and the hostess, the only guests were Richard and his wife, an elderly viscountess known for her sharp wit, and a middle-aged gentleman who served as Lady Whitmore's man of business. Eliza, wearing a simple but becoming gown of deep blue, greeted him with a warmth that seemed genuine rather than calculated. I must apologize for the smallness of our gathering, Lady Whitmore said as they moved to the dining room. I had hoped to include the Countess of Harrington and her daughters, but they had a prior engagement. The current size suits me perfectly, Edmund assured her, relieved to have avoided the Countess's 3 unmarried daughters. During dinner, Edmund found himself seated opposite Eliza, whose conversation proved as refreshing as her demeanor. Unlike most young ladies of his acquaintance, she spoke intelligently on topics ranging from agricultural improvements to literature, offering opinions that were both thoughtful and occasionally controversial. You cannot possibly believe that Wordsworth's poetry is superior to Byron's, Richard protested at one point. Not superior in skill, perhaps, Eliza conceded, but superior in sentiment. Wordsworth speaks to the common humanity in all of us, while Byron seems determined to remind us of our basest impulses. An interesting perspective, Edmund found himself saying. Though I wonder if the popularity of Byron's work suggests that most people prefer to be reminded of their baser nature than their higher aspirations. Eliza's eyes met his across the table. A cynical view, Your Grace. Do you truly believe people prefer darkness to light? I believe people are drawn to what resonates with their experience, Edmund replied. Those who have known suffering may find more truth in Byron's darkness than Wordsworth's pastoral idealism. A thoughtful expression crossed Eliza's face. Then perhaps what we seek in poetry, and in life, reflects not what we prefer, but what we know. The conversation moved on, but Edmund found himself returning to her words throughout the evening. What did Eliza Thornfield know of life, this young woman with her direct gaze and uncommon candor? She had lost her father, yes, but had she experienced the kind of soul-crushing grief that changed a person irrevocably? After dinner, when the gentlemen rejoined the ladies in the drawing-room, Edmund found himself gravitating toward Eliza, who stood by the window looking out at the garden. "You seem pensive, Miss Thornfield." She turned, offering a small smile. "I was thinking of home. My father's estate in Derbyshire. The gardens there would be blooming now with the first flowers of spring. You miss it?" "Every day." She sighed. "But it belongs to a distant cousin now. My father had no son, and the estate was entailed." "That must be difficult," Edmund said quietly, understanding all too well the pain of loss. "It is one of life's great injustices that a woman may pour her heart and soul into a home for years, only to be displaced by a man who has never set foot on the property." A flash of anger crossed her face before she composed herself. "Forgive me. That was unbecoming." On the contrary, it was refreshingly honest. Edmund hesitated, then asked, "What will you do now?" "Remain with your aunt. For the time being. Though I don't intend to become a permanent burden. I have some modest savings from my mother's dowry, and I've been considering." She stopped, a flush rising to her cheeks. "You'll think it absurd. Try me. I've been considering opening a small apothecary shop." She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "My mother taught me herbalism before she died, and I expanded my knowledge caring for my father. I developed several remedies that proved quite effective." Edmund raised his eyebrows. "An unusual ambition for a gentlewoman. Hence my reluctance to share it." She met his gaze directly. "But I have no desire to live on charity or to marry merely to secure my future. I would rather make my own way." Admirable, if unconventional. Edmund found himself impressed by her determination. Though society may not look kindly upon such an endeavor. Society rarely looks kindly upon women who step outside their prescribed roles, she replied with a wry smile. "But I've never been particularly concerned with society's approval. A dangerous attitude in London. Perhaps. But a necessary one if I'm to create a life of meaning rather than mere propriety." Edmund studied her, struck by the quiet confidence in her bearing. "You are an unusual woman, Miss Thornfield. And you, Your Grace, are not nearly as granite-like as your reputation suggests." Before Edmund could respond, Lady Whitmore approached, effectively ending their private conversation. For the remainder of the evening, Edmund found his attention repeatedly drawn to Eliza, despite his best efforts to maintain his customary detachment. When he departed, he made the grave error of kissing Eliza's hand in farewell. The touch of her skin against his lips sent an unexpected jolt through him, a sensation he had not experienced in years and had no wish to revive. "I shall not impose upon your aunt's hospitality again," he said quietly, for her ears alone. A shadow passed across her face. "Have I offended you, Your Grace?" "Not at all. But it would be best for both of us if our acquaintance did not deepen further." "I see." Her voice cooled. "Well then, I wish you good health and happiness, Your Grace." "And are you, Miss Thornfield?" With a final bow, Edmund departed, determined to put the intriguing woman from his mind. For nearly a fortnight, Edmund succeeded in avoiding Eliza Thornfield. He declined invitations to any event where she might be present and confined his riding in Hyde Park to hours when the fashionable crowd was absent. Yet despite his precautions, thoughts of her persisted, her forthright manner, her intelligent conversation, the warmth of her smile. It was, therefore, with considerable dismay that Edmund discovered her presence at an evening musicale he had been unable to avoid. His sister, Lady Margaret Preston, had arranged the entertainment, and her insistence that he attend had been impossible to refuse without causing a family rift. "You're scowling, Edmund," Margaret chided as they greeted guests. "At least attempt to look as though you're not contemplating murder." "I reserve such contemplations for special occasions," he replied dryly. "This is merely my neutral expression." Margaret sighed. "No wonder you've terrified half the young ladies in London." "Ah, Lady Whitmore and Miss Thornfield have arrived." Edmund's head jerked up involuntarily. Eliza stood in the entrance hall, wearing a gown of deep emerald that complemented her coloring and showed her figure to advantage. She was engaged in conversation with a young man Edmund recognized as Viscount Halsey, a notorious fortune hunter with charm in inverse proportion to his character. "Miss Thornfield appears to be making a favorable impression," Margaret observed. "Lord Halsey has scarcely left her side since their introduction at Lady Jersey's ball last week." Edmund felt an unwelcome surge of something dangerously close to jealousy. "Halsey pursues any woman with a respectable dowry. Actually, I understand Miss Thornfield's financial situation is quite modest. But she has made quite a splash this season. Her unconventional opinions and genuine manner have attracted attention." "Attention is not always beneficial," Edmund muttered. Margaret gave him a curious look. "You sound concerned. Do you know Miss Thornfield?" "We have met briefly," Edmund hedged, unwilling to elaborate on the circumstances of their acquaintance. "Well, you shall have the opportunity to become better acquainted. I've seated her next to you for supper." Edmund opened his mouth to protest, but Margaret had already moved away to greet more guests. He was left with no choice but to accept the inevitable encounter with as much grace as he could muster. Throughout the evening's musical performances, Edmund found his attention divided between the musicians and Eliza, who sat several rows ahead with Lady Whitmore and Viscount Halsey. The Viscount's attentions were obvious and increasingly familiar, his head frequently bent close to Eliza's ear, ostensibly to comment on the performance. Edmund's irritation grew with each whispered exchange, though he had no right to feel possessive of a woman he had deliberately pushed away. When the supper break arrived, Edmund dutifully escorted Eliza to her assigned seat beside him, maintaining a careful distance as they walked. "Your sister arranges a lovely entertainment, Your Grace," Eliza said politely as they were served. "Margaret has always had a talent for such things." Edmund kept his tone neutral. "I understand you have been enjoying your first season." "It has been educational, if occasionally overwhelming." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Though I'm still creating precarious situations with alarming regularity." Despite himself, Edmund felt his lips twitch. "No more runaway horses, I hope." "No, but last week I scandalized Lady Jersey by suggesting that women might be capable of understanding politics. And yesterday I stepped on Lord Pemberton's foot during a cotillion with such force that he limped for the remainder of the evening." "Deliberate, I presume?" Her eyes widened in mock innocence. "Your Grace! How could you suggest such a thing? Though if one must have one's foot trodden upon, it helps to have been exceedingly rude to one's dance partner immediately beforehand." Edmund couldn't suppress a chuckle. "You are a dangerous woman, Miss Thornfield." "So I've been told." She glanced toward Viscount Halsey, who was watching them with evident displeasure. "Though not nearly as dangerous as some believe me to be. Halsey has been paying you marked attention." "He has been most attentive," she agreed, her expression revealing nothing. Edmund hesitated, then said quietly, "You should know that his finances are in disarray. He seeks a wife with means to settle his debts." "I am aware." Eliza took a sip of wine. "He learned of my modest circumstances 3 days ago. His order has cooled considerably since then, though appearances must be maintained until he can transfer his attentions elsewhere without appearing mercenary." "You don't seem particularly disappointed." "Should I be? I have no desire to marry a man who values my dowry above my character." She studied him for a moment. "Why did you warn me about him? I thought you preferred our acquaintance to remain distant." Edmund found himself without a ready answer. "I merely thought you should be informed." "How gallant," she murmured, a hint of her earlier warmth returning. "For a man determined to avoid my company, you show a remarkable concern for my welfare." I have a natural aversion to seeing innocent young women manipulated by fortune hunters. And I have a natural aversion to being treated as though my company carries some contagion you fear contracting. Her direct gaze challenged him. You've gone to considerable lengths to avoid me these past 2 weeks, Your Grace. I can only conclude that something about me offends you deeply. You do not offend me, Miss Thornfield. Then why the deliberate avoidance? We seem to be forming, if not a friendship, at least a cordial acquaintance. Edmund set down his fork, his appetite gone. My reasons are personal and have nothing to do with any failing on your part. I see. Eliza's voice cooled. Well, I shall not press where I'm not wanted. If you'll excuse me, I believe Lady Whitmore is signalling for me. She rose, and Edmund stood as propriety dictated. As she turned to leave, a sudden desire to explain himself seized him. Miss Thornfield, he said, his voice low. My wife died 3 years ago. I have no wish to. That is, I find your company. He stopped, frustrated by his inability to articulate his feelings. Her expression softened. I understand, Your Grace. More than you might realize. She offered a gentle smile. We need not be intimate friends, but perhaps we needn't be strangers either. Before Edmund could respond, she had moved away to join her aunt, leaving him with an uncomfortable awareness that he had behaved badly toward a woman who deserved better treatment. The remainder of the evening passed slowly. Edmund observed Eliza from a distance, noting her easy conversation with those around her and the genuine interest she showed in the musical performances. When the final piece concluded, he found himself moving toward her before he could reconsider. Miss Thornfield, he said, bowing. Might I call upon you tomorrow? There is a matter I wish to discuss. Surprise flickered across her face. Of course, Your Grace. My aunt receives visitors after 2 o'clock. Until tomorrow, then. With another bow, Edmund took his leave, uncertain what had prompted his impulsive request but unwilling to withdraw it. The following afternoon found Edmund at Lady Whitmore's townhouse, his composure less steady than he would have preferred. He was shown into the drawing-room where Eliza sat alone, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Your Grace, she greeted him, rising. My aunt sends her apologies. She has been called away to visit an ailing friend and will return shortly. Edmund hesitated. Propriety demanded he return when Lady Whitmore was present. But the impropriety of remaining alone with Eliza seemed minor compared to the importance of what he wished to say. If you are uncomfortable receiving me without your aunt present, I can return another time, he offered. The door remains open, and my aunt's companion is in the adjoining room, Eliza replied, indicating an elderly woman visible through the partially open connecting door. I believe our reputations will survive the encounter. Edmund nodded and took the seat she indicated. I owe you an apology, Miss Thornfield. Do you? She resumed her place by the flowers. For what offense? My behavior toward you has been inconsistent. And at times, discourteous. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The truth is, I find your company both stimulating and disquieting. Eliza's hand stilled among the blooms. Disquieting. You remind me of things I have tried to forget. Feelings I have no wish to revive. Edmund met her gaze directly. My marriage was not a happy one, Miss Thornfield. Caroline and I were ill-suited from the start, a fact we both recognized too late. When she died birthing our son, I felt relief. And then crushing guilt for that relief. Eliza's expression softened. You cannot blame yourself for feeling what you felt. Can I not? A better man would have found a way to make her happy. A better man would have mourned her properly instead of feeling liberated by her death. The words, once started, seemed impossible to stop. I swore I would never marry again, never subject another woman to my coldness, never risk the pain of caring too deeply or not deeply enough. And my company disquiets you because when I am with you, I find myself questioning that vow. Edmund rose and walked to the window, unable to face her as he confessed. You make me wish for things I have denied myself. You make me wonder if my heart is not quite as dead as I believed." A long silence followed his words. When he finally turned, Eliza was watching him with an unreadable expression. "I have experienced loss as well, Your Grace," she said quietly. "My mother when I was 16. My father more recently. With each death, I told myself I would guard my heart more carefully, avoid attachments that could lead to pain." A sad smile touched her lips. "But I discovered that closing oneself off from potential pain also means closing oneself off from potential joy. And you prefer the risk of pain to the certainty of numbness. I prefer life with all its messy emotions to a half-existence where nothing touches me deeply." She rose and moved toward him. "You speak of your coldness as though it is an immutable part of your character. But I have seen warmth in you, kindness, even humor. Perhaps the granite facade is just that, a facade." Edmund felt something shift within him at her words. "Even if that were true, I am not fit company for a young woman with her life ahead of her. Should I not be the judge of whose company suits me?" Eliza challenged, stopping a few feet from him. "I am not asking you to set aside your vow never to marry. I am merely suggesting that friendship need not be forbidden." "Friendship," Edmund repeated, testing the word. "Yes, friendship. That connection between two minds that value each other's thoughts and character." Her eyes held his. "Unless you find the prospect too alarming." For the first time in years, Edmund felt a genuine smile form. "I believe I might endure the alarm, Miss Thornfield." "How very brave of you, Your Grace." The arrival of Lady Whitmore prevented further private conversation, but as Edmund took his leave, he carried with him a sense of possibility that had long been absent from his life. Over the following weeks, a cautious friendship developed between Edmund and Eliza. They encountered each other at social events where Edmund, to the astonishment of society, began to linger rather than departing at the earliest opportunity. He found himself seeking her company, drawn to her intelligence and the refreshing honesty of her conversation. Their friendship did not go unremarked. Gossip speculated about the nature of their relationship, with some suggesting that the Granite Duke had finally found a woman who could melt his cold heart. Edmund ignored the rumors, focusing instead on the unexpected pleasure he found in Eliza's company. It was during a quiet moment at a garden party hosted by Richard that their friendship deepened into something more. Edmund had found Eliza sitting alone on a stone bench, sketching the blooms around her. "You have talent," he observed, looking over her shoulder at the detailed rendering of a rose. Eliza glanced up, a smile lighting her face. "Thank you. It's a hobby I've had little time to indulge since coming to London. The social whirl leaves one perpetually exhausted. Yet exhilarated as well, I imagine." Edmund sat beside her, careful to maintain a proper distance. "You seem to have adapted well to London life." "I've adapted, yes. But I find myself missing the simplicity of country life more than I expected." She closed her sketchbook. "In Derbyshire, I could walk for miles without encountering anyone. Here, I am never truly alone." "The lack of privacy is one of the city's greatest flaws," Edmund agreed. "Though I found solace in my library at Westmoreland House. A private sanctuary. Of sorts. When the pressures of society become overwhelming, I retreat there with a good book and a glass of brandy." He hesitated, then added, "It was my father's habit as well. Some of my fondest memories are of him reading to me in that room when I was a boy." Eliza's expression softened. "You rarely speak of your father." "He died when I was 20. A riding accident." Edmund's voice grew distant. "He was a good man, fair to his tenants, devoted to my mother. I've tried to honor his memory in how I manage the dukedom, though I fear I lack his natural warmth." "I think you underestimate yourself," Eliza said gently. "The tenants on your Derbyshire estate speak highly of you." Edmund looked at her in surprise. "You've spoken with my tenants?" A blush rose to her cheeks. "I may have made inquiries during my last visit to the area. My father's estate borders your northern properties. I was curious about the man behind the title." And what did you learn from these inquiries? That the Granite Duke is not nearly as cold as he would have the world believe. That he reduced rents during the poor harvest 2 years ago. That he established a school for the tenants' children and pays the schoolmaster's salary from his own pocket. Her gaze met his. That he visits his wife's grave on the first day of each month with a bouquet of white roses. Edmund felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he had not experienced in years. You have been thorough in your investigations. I like to understand the people who interest me. Her directness, as always, was disarming. And do I interest you, Miss Thornfield? More than is probably wise, Your Grace. The honesty of her answer created a moment of perfect clarity for Edmund. Looking at Eliza, her intelligent eyes, the slight curve of her lips, the strength and vulnerability she embodied, he realized with sudden certainty that he was falling in love with her. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it brought a curious sense of peace, as though some part of him had always known this moment would come. Edmund, he said quietly. When we are alone, I would like you to call me Edmund. Her eyes widened slightly. That would be most improper. Probably. But I find I no longer care overmuch about propriety. A slow smile spread across her face. Edmund, then. And you must call me Eliza. Eliza. Her name felt right on his lips, as though he had been waiting to speak it for years. The moment was interrupted by the approach of other guests, forcing them to resume more conventional conversation. But something had shifted between them, a boundary crossed that could not be re-established. As summer progressed into early autumn, Edmund found himself drawn deeper into Eliza's life. He learned of her passion for healing, her dream of opening an apothecary, and her frustration with the limitations society placed on women of her class. In turn, he shared with her his concerns about his young son, his hopes for improving conditions on his estates, and gradually, the pain of his first marriage. Caroline was the daughter of an earl, beautiful and accomplished, he told Eliza one afternoon as they walked in Hyde Park, a proper distance apart but speaking in low tones. Our families arranged the match when I was 25 and she was 19. I had no objections, she seemed pleasant enough, and I understood my duty to the dukedom. You didn't love her, Eliza observed. I respected her. I admired her beauty and her social graces. I thought affection would grow with time. Edmund's expression darkened. But Caroline had been in love with another man, a younger son with no prospects. Her family forbade the match and pressured her to accept my proposal. She resented you for it. With every fiber of her being. Edmund's voice grew distant. She performed her duties as Duchess flawlessly in public. In private, she retreated behind a wall of cold politeness that I could never penetrate. When she became pregnant with our son, I hoped the child would bring us closer. Instead, she viewed her pregnancy as the final link in the chain binding her to a life she hated. I'm so sorry, Eliza said softly. For both of you. The greatest tragedy was that we might have been friends, had circumstances been different. Caroline was intelligent and witty when her guard dropped. But she could never forgive me for being the instrument of her unhappiness, though the arrangement was not of my making. And when she died, I mourned what might have been more than what was, Edmund admitted. And I vowed never to trap another woman in a loveless marriage, no matter how advantageous the match might appear. Eliza was silent for a long moment. A noble sentiment. Though perhaps unfair to women who might enter marriage with their eyes open, aware of its limitations and possibilities. You believe a woman might choose such a fate willingly. I believe a woman might choose a partner based on respect, shared values, and genuine affection, even if the grand passion of poetry and novels is absent. Eliza's gaze was direct. Not all marriages are tragedies, Edmund. Some are partnerships of equals who grow in love over time. Her words stayed with Edmund long after they parted, challenging assumptions he had held for years. Could marriage be something other than the prison it had been with Caroline? Could it be a source of comfort rather than constraint? These questions occupied his thoughts as he prepared for a week-long visit to his country estate. Business required his attention, and he found himself reluctant to leave London, and Eliza, even temporarily. The night before his departure, Edmund attended a ball at which Eliza was present. She wore a gown of deep burgundy that complemented her coloring perfectly, and he found himself unable to look away as she moved gracefully through a country dance with Richard. "You're staring, Edmund," his sister Margaret remarked, appearing at his side. "The entire room has noticed your fixation on Miss Thornfield." Edmund forced his attention away from Eliza. "I was merely observing the dance." "Of course you were." Margaret's tone made clear she didn't believe him for a moment. "Just as you've been merely observing at every social event this season. Society is beginning to wonder when you'll make your intentions clear." "I have no intentions to declare." "No? Then you should inform your expression, which betrays you at every turn." Margaret softened her voice. "I like her, Edmund. She's intelligent, kind, and refreshingly genuine. She would make an excellent duchess. The dukedom is secure. I have an heir. There is no need for me to remarry." "Need? Perhaps not. But want is another matter entirely." Margaret placed a hand on his arm. "I have not seen you look at any woman the way you look at Eliza Thornfield. Not even Caroline." Before Edmund could respond, the dance ended, and Richard escorted Eliza to where they stood. "Your Grace, Lady Preston," Eliza curtsied. "A lovely evening, is it not?" "Indeed," Margaret agreed. "Though I understand my brother will miss the Harringtons' ball next week due to estate business." "Only a brief absence," Edmund said, noting the flicker of disappointment in Eliza's eyes. "I depart tomorrow but expect to return within the week." "The countryside must be beautiful this time of year," Eliza remarked. "I envy you the open fields and fresh air." "Perhaps you would like to see Westmoreland Hall someday," Edmund said impulsively. "The gardens are particularly fine in late summer." A soft blush colored Eliza's cheeks. "I would like that very much." The moment was charged with unspoken meaning that even Richard and Margaret could not miss. After an awkward pause, Richard offered his arm to Margaret, tactfully leaving Edmund and Eliza relatively alone in the crowded ballroom. "I shall miss our conversations while you're away," Eliza admitted, her voice low. "As shall I." Edmund hesitated, then added, "I have grown more dependent on your company than I care to admit." "Is that such a terrible thing? To need another person's presence? It is when one has built one's life around independence." Eliza's eyes held his. "Perhaps a life built around independence is only half a life." Before Edmund could respond, Lady Whitmore approached to claim her niece for an introduction, leaving him with Eliza's words echoing in his mind. The journey to Westmoreland Hall the next day was filled with thoughts of Eliza. As Edmund's carriage rolled through the countryside, he found himself comparing his feelings for her with what he had felt for Caroline. With Caroline, there had been duty, admiration, and eventually, resignation. With Eliza, there was something altogether different, a connection that went beyond physical attraction or social compatibility to touch something deeper in his soul. At Westmoreland Hall, Edmund immersed himself in estate business, reviewing accounts, meeting with his steward, and visiting tenants. Yet thoughts of Eliza intruded constantly, making it difficult to focus on the tasks at hand. On the third day of his visit, a letter arrived from Richard that changed everything. "Edmund, I write with news that cannot wait for your return to London. Miss Thornfield has fallen seriously ill. A fever of unknown origin seized her 2 days ago, and the physicians fear for her recovery. Lady Whitmore has been beside herself with worry. I know your feelings for the lady, though you have been reluctant to acknowledge them openly. If they are as deep as I suspect, you will want to know of her condition. She calls for you in her delirium. Your friend." Richard Edmund read the letter twice, his heart pounding with fear. Without hesitation, he ordered his carriage prepared for immediate departure, leaving instructions for his steward regarding the remaining estate business. The journey back to London was agonizing, each mile stretching interminably as Edmund's mind filled with images of Eliza suffering, perhaps dying, while he was absent. He had lost so many people in his life, his parents, his wife, but the thought of losing Eliza was unbearable in a way that transcended all previous grief. It was late evening when Edmund's carriage finally reached Lady Whitmore's townhouse. He was shown immediately to the drawing room where Lady Whitmore sat, her face drawn with exhaustion. "Your Grace," she said, rising wearily. "Richard said he had written to you, but I did not expect you to abandon your business so quickly." "How is she?" Edmund asked, dispensing with pleasantries. "The fever broke this morning, thank God. The physician believes the worst has passed, though she remains very weak." Lady Whitmore studied him with shrewd eyes. "She asked for you repeatedly during her delirium." Edmund felt a surge of relief so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "May I see her?" Lady Whitmore hesitated. "It would be most improper. She is confined to her bedchamber, and in her weakened state." "I understand," Edmund said, though the disappointment was acute. "Perhaps you could tell her I have returned to London and inquired after her health." "I shall do better than that," Lady Whitmore decided. "If you will wait here, I believe we can arrange for a brief visit that preserves propriety while satisfying both your concern and her peace of mind." She left the room, returning some 15 minutes later. "Eliza has been moved to the small sitting room adjoining her chamber. Her maid will remain with her as chaperone, and I shall leave the door open. You may visit her for a short time, no more than 10 minutes. She is still very weak." Edmund followed Lady Whitmore upstairs to a cozy sitting room where Eliza reclined on a chaise lounge, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth of the evening. Her face was pale, her usually vibrant eyes dulled by illness, but she smiled when she saw him. "Your Grace," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came back." "Of course I came back." Edmund moved to her side, kneeling beside the chaise so their faces were level. In the corner, Eliza's maid kept a discreet but watchful presence. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of wild horses," she admitted with a weak attempt at humor. "But much improved from yesterday, they tell me. You gave us quite a fright." "I'm sorry." Her hand moved slightly toward his, stopping just short of touching. "I didn't mean to disrupt your business." "Hang the business," Edmund said fiercely. "Nothing is more important than your recovery." A hint of her usual spirit flickered in her eyes. "Careful, Your Grace. You're in danger of revealing that you care for me." "I do care for you. More than I thought possible." The words came easily now, all reservations swept away by the fear of losing her. "When I received Richard's letter, I realized something I've been too stubborn to admit." "And what was that?" Eliza's voice was faint but intent. "That my vow never to marry again was based on fear rather than wisdom. That in protecting myself from pain, I was denying myself the possibility of happiness." Edmund took a deep breath. "That I have fallen in love with you, Eliza Thornfield, against every dictate of reason and caution." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "I had begun to think you would never say those words." "I have been a fool," Edmund acknowledged. "A stubborn, frightened fool who nearly lost the most precious thing in his life because he was too afraid to reach for it." "Not lost," Eliza whispered, finally allowing her fingertips to brush against his. "Just delayed." Lady Whitmore appeared in the doorway, signaling that the visit must end. Edmund reluctantly rose to his feet. "Rest and recover," he told Eliza. "We have much to discuss when you are well." "I shall hold you to that promise," she replied, a hint of her usual determination showing through her weakness. As Edmund left the townhouse, his heart was lighter than it had been in years. The fear that had gripped him during his journey from Westmoreland Hall had crystallized his feelings beyond any doubt. He loved Eliza Thornfield, and if she would have him, he would spend the rest of his life ensuring she never regretted accepting a reformed Granite Duke. Eliza's recovery progressed steadily over the following week. Edmund called at Lady Whitmore's townhouse daily, bringing books, flowers, and on one memorable occasion, a detailed sketch of the gardens at Westmoreland Hall drawn by his own hand. "I didn't know you could draw," Eliza said, examining the sketch with delight as they sat in the drawing room, Lady Whitmore providing proper chaperonage from the other side of the room. "A hidden talent," Edmund admitted. "Though my skill is modest compared to yours." "It's beautiful." I can almost smell the roses. She traced the outline of a flower with her fingertip. You must have spent hours on this. It gave me something to do while waiting for you to be well enough for proper conversation. Edmund lowered his voice. Lady Whitmore has been most generous with her time as chaperone, but I find myself longing for the privacy we once enjoyed in Hyde Park. Patience, Your Grace, Eliza teased. The physician says I may take short walks next week if my strength continues to improve. Then I shall pray for your rapid recovery and favorable weather. Edmund hesitated, then added softly, there is something important I wish to discuss with you, away from watchful eyes and listening ears. A blush colored Eliza's cheeks. I believe I can guess the nature of this important matter. Can you indeed? Edmund raised an eyebrow. I find I'm not as transparent as I once believed. Only to those who know how to look. Eliza's smile held a promise that warmed Edmund's heart. True to the physician's prediction, Eliza was permitted to take short walks the following week. On a mild September morning, Edmund called at Lady Whitmore's townhouse and found Eliza ready for an outing, dressed in a walking gown of soft blue and a matching pelisse. Lady Whitmore has consented to allow us to walk in the square garden, Eliza informed him as they descended the front steps. Though she extracted a promise that we would remain in view of the house at all times. A reasonable compromise, Edmund agreed, offering his arm. Though I had hoped for more privacy. They strolled slowly around the garden, Eliza's strength not yet fully restored. When they reached a secluded bench partially screened by shrubbery but still visible from the house, Edmund suggested they rest. You're still pale, he observed as they sat. We should not overtax your strength. I'm fine, Eliza assured him. Just grateful to be out of doors after so many days confined inside. Edmund took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Eliza, there is something I must ask you. Yes? Her eyes met his, warm with anticipation. When I received word of your illness, I realized something that should have been obvious to me for months. Life is unpredictable and often cruelly short. To deny oneself happiness out of fear is the greatest folly. He took her gloved hand in his. I love you, Eliza. Your intelligence, your courage, your honesty, everything about you has breached the walls I built around my heart after Caroline's death. Eliza's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Edmund. I once vowed never to marry again, believing myself incapable of making a woman happy. You have shown me that my heart is not as dead as I thought, that I am capable of not just affection but deep and abiding love. Edmund slid from the bench to one knee before her. Eliza Thornfield, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Of becoming the Duchess of Westmoreland, not because duty demands it, but because our love, makes it the deepest desire of my heart. Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Edmund, I will marry you. Edmund raised her hand to his lips, kissing it fervently. You have made me the happiest of men. And you have given me more than I ever dared hope for. Eliza's smile was radiant despite her tears. Not just a home or a position, but a partner who values me for myself. Always, Edmund vowed. You have healed something in me I thought beyond repair. I intend to spend the rest of my life showing you the depth of my gratitude and love. From the window of the townhouse, Lady Whitmore observed the scene with a satisfied smile. The Granite Duke had finally melted, his heart thawed by the warmth of a woman who saw beyond his facade to the man beneath. And in a garden in London, as autumn leaves began to fall around them, Edmund and Eliza sealed their betrothal with a kiss that promised a lifetime of the happiness they had both once thought beyond their reach.